Okay then, for this section then we're going to be having a look at fertilisers, and we're going to be looking at their uses and also some of the problems that they can cause. Now, when we looked at the harbour process before, we looked at making fertilisers, but here we're actually looking at chemicals that the farmers use to provide the plants with the essential elements they need for growth to increase the crop yield. That's the whole point of using a fertiliser. It is full of the minerals that plants need to grow bigger and faster. And the ones you are going to come across are usually known as NPK, and you might see there might be a picture of a sack of fertilisers with NPK on the front, and they might say to you what chemicals are in there. So N obviously is nitrogen, P for phosphorus, K for potassium. If you're not sure or you can't remember, don't forget the periodic table is on the back of your exam paper, so go to that and have a look and make sure you get them right. Now, these elements are usually found combined with other elements in the soil, forming the compounds called the minerals. For example, ammonium nitrate contains the nitrogen, potassium phosphate, look at the words, potassium contains potassium, and phosphate contains phosphorus. The plants absorb the water and the dissolved minerals that are in there going through their roots. They cannot absorb insoluble minerals. So the fertilisers are the chemicals that provide the plants with essential elements. They make the crop plants grow faster and bigger, as I said, and it's all about increasing your yield to make sure you are producing more food, and this is really important as we are an ever-growing population, and we need to make sure there's enough food for everybody to eat. Now, there is also a bit of a downside to this, and it's a process called eutrophication, and you should be able to describe this process. Sometimes this can be, and it may well be, one of those 6-mark questions where you're asked to describe the process of eutrophication. So really what happens is the farmers come along and they spray the fertilisers onto their fields, and sometimes if their fields are near a river or lake, or if it's a windy day, then what can happen is either if it's raining, the rain can wash the fertiliser into the river, or the wind can blow it in while it's being sprayed. Now this causes a real big problem, because what happens is, as much as plants love those chemicals in order to grow quickly, so do the algae. And the algae, and that's what makes the rivers look green, they also grow really fast, and this is called algal bloom. Now the problem is, once you get a lot of algae, it actually creates like a blanket at the top of the water, and it blocks the light from going into the water. Now because of this, you may find that the plants underneath will start to die because they can't get the light, because then they can't carry out photosynthesis and so on, and they can't produce energy. You also get then a lot of the algae can die as well because they're plants. So when you've got all of this building up, you've then got the decomposers, the microbes trying to break down all the dead material, and so it means the microbes then will respire and start to use up all the oxygen. Again, the second layer of the problem now is that the dissolved oxygen in the water is being used up, and it means your aquatic animals like your fish will all die because they're just not getting any oxygen. So again, like I said, this is a huge problem. So like I said, that could well be a 6-mark question, so please make sure you know that. Now the next part of this topic is looking at how to actually make a fertiliser. Now I'll talk to you about a fertiliser being a reaction that takes place to make a neutral substance. Okay, now if you think about it, when you're making a neutral substance, what you're doing is adding an acid and an alkali, and if you add it to the right concentrations you will make a neutral. And the problem is, obviously, you can only do that when you've got an indicator in there so you can see that it's neutral. So the way to do this is, if you have a beaker to start with, or a conical flask, and you actually measure out a certain amount of alkali, and let's just say you want 25 centimetres cubed, just put a few drops of indicator in there so that you can see that it's an alkali. Then you use a long glass tube with a little tap on the bottom, and that's called a burette, and you fill that with acid, but you take a note of where the line comes to, and then you turn the little tap at the bottom and you drop the acid into the alkali, one drop at a time, and you do that until your solution becomes neutral. Once you've done that, you can then make a note of how much acid you have used. So now you know that you've used 25 centimetres of alkali, and now you've seen how much acid you need. So now you can do the whole thing again, but this time don't use any indicator, because obviously you want your neutral substance, that's your fertiliser. Once you've done that, you can then pour your neutral substance into an evaporating basin. You can evaporate the water out of it, and then you'll be left with your salt crystals. That is your fertiliser. Again, that could well be one of those 6-mark questions, so make sure you know that procedure well.